Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend, Ed Rosa.
That's me. Hi. My filmmaking partner and I have a YouTube channel, Toothless Richard Productions, where you can see a number of our short films.
When I began publishing Blockbusters and Birdwalks, it was a hosting site for essays and thoughts that I had, and that branched off into making podcasts. Separately, I have another partnership with a friend, Richard Ryan, making the High-Low Bro Show. One thing that Richard said to me in our last recording concerning the Big Doll House is the following.
I think that 1971 is in many ways a crux point when American counterculture, and specifically the anti-Vietnam War movement, has begun to get a little sour.
As always happens, the counterculture has sort of become the culture, and there's a lot on society's plate. It's too bad that the Civil War couldn't have been won this way, impregnating the hearts and minds of the traitors to the correct way of thinking through hot, limitless sex. Clint Eastwood seems to have become sort of an unintentional mascot for us.
He is the living God.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, and this one was interesting too because it was a little against type for him. With this, I mean, the good guys are the Southern women. We do have an idyllic master-slave relationship.
That's right.
The very thing that Song of the South is derided for. Mm-hmm. We have a happy slave. You know, from Birth of a Nation on, Hollywood really did seem to, and then you got stuff like Drum and Mandingo and these kind of movies that are like these kind of like sex romps set in like the antebellum South or whatever. In today's Hollywood, I don't know what the last movie I saw that dealt with like a plantation or the Civil War or whatever. Possibly Django Unchained, but I don't think that they'd make a Gone with the Wind today.
For the dove she will leave you, the raven will come, and death will come marching at the beat of the drum.
As I've expressed before, I was raised in a household of Clint Eastwood devoted people.
Yes.
And we were very devoted to his sort of archly masculine roles. This one was interesting because it was always left to the side as maybe one that wasn't celebrated or known, and I'm thinking back in my childhood and imagining a couple of things. And one, this movie's older than I am, so it was probably something my folks probably were aware of, but it's my guess that they turned this one down to go see Dirty Harry, which was this year as well.
Which makes more sense.
Which is more mainstream of the taste they later gave me.
Well, and I also got to believe that for many of Clint Eastwood's fans back then that might have seen this, he probably got a lot of mail, a lot of letters going like, Clint, what are you doing?
Come all you pretty fair maids, come walk in the sun, and don't let your young man ever carry a gun.
I was expecting to think this movie was pretty bad. I don't have that experience. I think this movie's pretty good.
I do too, yeah.
Do I think it's just the cat's meow? No, it's like a cat's mew. But it is strange.
Yeah.
Where are we? We're in 1863. We're in the Civil War. We are in Mississippi. When a girls' school that's run in isolation in this giant manse with this wall and a giant gate, one of the girls is out gathering mushrooms off-site. She's not supposed to do this, but she's the youngest of the group. Perhaps she's 12.
I was like, where's her pig? I was like waiting to see her truffle hunting pig.
Right, but she didn't need a truffle hunting pig because Nicolas Cage is not in this movie. She rounds a tree, and there's Eastwood, dirty as hell, shot in the leg, injured, and he falls on top of her. She is frightened, but she brings him back to the household. The marm in charge of the joint, played by Geraldine Page, descends upon him. Oh, we've got to turn him in. But they all take sympathy on this injured man. Let's at least give him a chance to be nursed back to health before we call the authorities. At which point, every woman in this household, including one slave, each of them have designs on humping him, more or less.
Yes.
And he realizes his best way to health, vitality, some fun, and eventual return to the Union lines is to hump him back.
Yes.
But of course, their jealousies overcome this happy situation from the makers of virtually every pornographic movie that's got a narrative you've ever seen.
Yes.
It appears that he's going to get the happy ending we think he's headed to the whole way through, of taking the school marm who he's bedded and he's planning to wed. But he's poisoned by the young girl who brings back the same mushrooms that she'd been hunting earlier in the piece, and they bury him.
Or the different ones. She finds
the good ones versus the bad
ones. Yes.
Clint Eastwood does not survive the narrative. That's rare. Right. He's not an altogether good guy. I would say mostly he's an amoral figure, an opportunistic soldier caught behind enemy lines who realizes that his life hangs in the balance of manipulating the psychosexual appetites of women and girls.
Yes.
On the other hand, it's extremely perverse because among the things that show up, and here we should just name people, that is Geraldine Page plays Martha Farnsworth, who co-owns this home with her brother. Mm-hmm. Her brother presumably has gone off to war, and they all assume that he has been killed.
Yeah, we don't actually find out what happens to him, but he's not there for whatever reason, probably fighting.
And Martha was definitely in love with her brother. We get flashbacks.
Which is a weird thing for all these Southern movies. They kind of, Django had the same thing with Calvin Candy and his sister. Like, I don't know what's going on with that.
The incestuous quality of what it is to be in charge of things, I think, has something to do with the pollution of the Southern belief system, of the great mission of the pre-Civil War era. And I suppose that's a way of these Northern filmmakers from Hollywood taking this somewhat celebrated novel and then translating it into a movie, is to say, while we're going to uphold the physical beauty of this place, because this glimpse of the South, which I think may have been shot in Louisiana and other parts, Mississippi may have been part of it. It's lush, beautiful country where clearly things grow. It's got lots of greenery and all that. Is fundamentally polluted by a couple of key features. There's a slavery intact relationship because Mrs. Farnsworth owns Hallie, played by Mae Mercer, who I think was a fairly well-established musician. She's a lovely woman. But they seem to have, yes, a master-slave relationship, but there is a quality of Hallie has a great deal of independence. Mm-hmm. She's able to demand things of these girls that are at this school. She's able to run the household with real authority. For whatever reason, their home seems to sit on some sort of a crossroads that's well-traveled. There's both the home guard that go by on a daily patrol just to make sure there aren't any Union or Union sympathizers harassing these women or otherwise loose in the landscape, and periodically troops, actual formations of troops, come and go from the front, including amputees from war problems and battle and all of the rest. But none of those fellows are interesting. None of them are worthwhile. And what do we get but Clint Eastwood to just roll right up in the joint? You could do a little worse by the men you could pick to star in this movie. Yeah. And arguably the movie doesn't work if you take somebody who's dysfunctionally gross looking.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Well, no, but that's real. That's why the best thing to be in life is hot.
And that's what we watch in this movie. Every single person here wants a little piece of Clint. And he plays Corporal John McBurney. McBee is how he asked to be called, and the women call him by various names depending on who they are and how they meet him. Mr. Yankee is what Hallie calls him. Mr. McBee is what Amy, this little girl, calls him, and so on. Obviously, this sets the template for a whole lot of porn, as we've said.
Oh, yeah.
One dude and many women of service. That's the problem he's got. But it's also a little dicier than that, and more interesting than that. These women have the secret belief that they alone captivate his interest and his gaze and so on. He knows that's what they believe, and contrives circumstances, as far as he is able, to self-isolate so that he can deal with them in a one-on-one basis. In the movie's architecture, they trap him in the music room of this manse, where they can hold him under lock and key and close the blinds and trap him while he is rehabilitating from his gunshot wound. That means that only from the outside can you get in with the key, so various of the members of the household do visit him, whether to find out if he's got enough to eat, whether he needs some clean linens, and he's good about making the appropriate small talk and aiming himself at each one of these characters. But there's one note that gets you off on the sort of wrong or right foot, and that's when Amy, this little 12-year-old girl who's looking for mushrooms, finds him. They stumble towards the house, but he hears the rumble of horsemen, and he knows they're likely to be Confederate soldiers. So he traps her with him, with his body weight, behind a tree blind, and just as the soldiers pause, he kisses her. Now, this is 71. And at the time they made the movie, I think he's a 40-year-old man. And the time they made the movie, the actress who plays Amy, and that is Pamela Furden, I think was herself 12, 13 years of age.
Yeah.
I don't know too many circumstances where that would be cool.
Today it would be just canceled into the shadow realm. Are you kidding?
Right.
Yeah,
and
no
so
way.
that's one of the very first things that happens. But it seals a couple of nice wraparound features to this whole movie. You can see its trajectory from those acts. She's searching for mushrooms to gather food.
Which
He's
is
injured,
funny because mushrooms are fairly phallic.
and they're meant to be an aphrodisiac in some cultures, depending on the kind of mushroom. He is a predator preying on this underage girl. Her parents signed off on that. Eastwood signed off on that. This is before intimacy coordinators. So it's a weird thing to behold. And we know that that attention, him to her, is what bonds her to him. Mm-hmm. And throughout the piece, then, she's really quite interested in his welfare, whether he's okay. She confesses love at a certain point, and he knows all of this.
Have you read the book?
No.
Okay.
I was encouraged to maybe think about it. And I know subsequently, maybe you're aware of this too, this has been remade. Coppola.
Yeah, Coppola
Sofia
made it in
Coppola.
2017. Yeah,
Right.
With Colin Farrell.
I was thinking that could be an interesting thing to go test, because she would be wading into this contemporary reevaluation of some of these traits. And Colin Farrell, like Eastwood,
certainly
beautiful young guy.
Yeah, well, and I got to believe the eye through which Don Siegel would see this story is much different than that which Sofia Coppola would see it. Was the book written by a man or a woman?
It was a man.
It was, okay.
And the screenplay, I think, was gussed up between different screenwriters. The people who did want to make this movie had disagreements about how they want it to be made.
Right.
There was a happy ending where Eastwood's character runs off with the school marm and they're okay. And
Right.
they survive this experience. The original idea was, no, let's stay truer to the book where it ends badly for him.
Which is much better.
It is much better.
That would be really interesting, actually, to now read the book and then see the Sofia Coppola version and just see, what was really going on in the source material, and to see how differently each of the two filmmakers
Right. A woman
handled
filmmaker
it.
of the closer to now versus a mature a male filmmaker
Right.
then
Right.
was dealing with things. Because in the end, I don't think that this is, as I have read over the years, this movie is sometimes discussed as a feminist parable. It's also
I can see that.
It's also described as a misogynistic
I
fantasy.
can see that. Well, that's the problem with intersectionality.
Right.
You can read everything, two different ways. You know what I mean?
It can be arch,
And
it is both of those things,
right.
because it is entirely about a certain form of female empowerment within a very closed circumstance that we have a hard time accessing even imaginistically, because it's 170 years ago in the American South with very different roles for how the world worked.
But it also is kind of realistic about the fact that men and women both want it, perhaps in different ways.
Here I want to pinpoint the young actress who plays Carol. This is Joanne Harris. She's a bit of a vixen. Mm-hmm. She codes as sexually experienced, as knowing what her body's parts present as attractive to a fella, and she basically just drops it in his face repeatedly. And eventually he goes to her in the night, and they are caught having the sex, and that's what sort of starts to goof up the balance that he's trying to come by. The additional thing to realize symbolically is he's shot in the leg. And, of course, that's hugely phallic, in that your leg doesn't work, you can't walk properly. But what kind of a man can't walk properly?
Right.
Well, one who doesn't have a working wiener.
Well, and then he even has that line later on. He's like, what are you going to cut off my other leg? But he's not really talking about his leg. He's talking about his penis.
He is. It's not quite explicit, but we know what he's saying. Right. And at a certain point, when he has had his leg lopped off and he's got phantom symptoms of the leg that was once there. It's kind of gross that way when you consider that that's understood in the world of today, but I suspect was relatively unknown in the mainstream of American life because we weren't paying a lot of attention to war amputees.
Right. Although, it was, at the time with Vietnam going on, I mean, this is certainly...
It's resonant with that.
Yeah.
I think that these filmmakers, Siegel and Eastwood both, over the years have given interviews where they talk about this movie being Vietnam-related. I don't see that except for the coincidence that the Vietnam War, for America's involvement in that experience, was definitely still happening. And while this is Civil War, you can see the war, it must be the same. I don't view it that way.
Right.
I view it more as dealing with the changing social roles between men and women in circumstances where men who are traditionally in the workspace suddenly find themselves in a domestic space. The way that, in reverse, women were beginning to show up in male public-facing work and were being treated badly and were trapped.
Right.
Here, that man is trapped because he can't get away. At first, they don't let him get away, but even if he were to escape this home, he's got a bum leg.
Yeah.
And eventually he doesn't have that anymore.
Right.
The Marm, who is...
Edwina Dabney.
The Marm Edwina,
Yes.
played by Elizabeth Hartman, she comes to him after his gangrenous leg, or potentially gangrenous leg, has been removed and says, I don't care that you've only got the one leg. I still love you. Which must be nice affirmation for somebody who's been so grotesquely harmed.
Well, yeah, because he very quickly goes from, I'm going to have sex with all of you, to, we're getting married.
I'm picking just the one.
Yeah.
So the transformation in his social and psychological needs, we don't understand. He's a character who's not dense that way, and we don't spend time marinating in what motivates him, except through the explicit flashbacks for how he was sharp shooting Confederate soldiers until he himself was sharp shot by a sniper, which is how all of this thing kicks off. We don't know where he's from, we don't know his backstory, we don't know his family life, and it doesn't really matter. We don't know why he suddenly goes conventional, and he does appear genuinely apologetic while he's consuming the poisonous meal of mushrooms that's going to end up killing him.
Yeah, and you almost get, there's almost like a flash of like regret in Geraldine Page's face.
I unpacked this movie against the understanding that this was a certain kind of male fantasy brought to life. I'll admit that I've had fantasies about being the desirable male in a pool of women where we could all enjoy cavorting guilt-free.
Yeah.
I would have zero competition from other men, and I would have zero guilt or sense of jealousy towards any of the women, towards me or one another.
Right. Unfortunately, these have remained fantasies.
They're completely fantastic because I'm a jealous, rage-filled dude with certain kinds of norms that I can never escape. But this is an opportunity to have all of those points of reference be rejiggered in a fantasy narrative set in the historic past. What I came away from it thinking, however, is that it just reaffirms how goofed up people are when they're in monocultures. Whether that monoculture is white dominant, supremacist American South pre-Civil War, whether that's a women without constructive relationships to positive men who are helpful and useful and not incestuous brothers or weirdos with buck teeth going off to war, or if it's just an all-male kind of a grouping. Parenthetically, in this last week, I've rewatched the movie Fury, the squad movie in a tank.
Not the 1936.
No,
Fritz
not
Lang.
the Fritz Lang. This is the Brad Pitt tank war movie. And I point that out because there are several speaking parts in that movie for women, but those women are killed almost immediately after speaking. It is a butch male universe.
Right.
And that butch male universe results in just harm for everybody.
Well, even though we only see really two groups of men. They're not totally evil, but I mean, one of them is certainly looking for sex with a possibility of like rape. Kind of hanging.
Right, and that's the Confederates who come to the gate in the middle of the night.
And they're like, bang, bang, like they clearly...
We need to come in and take a look at these girls and make sure they're safe.
Right, and I mean, he all but, said, like, look, my boys need to get laid here,
yeah.
Right? And then the only other one is the dudes who get summoned by when Carol puts the blue
home guard,
fabric
right, who come to investigate whether you've got
and
Union siding.
They too. I mean, there's no suggestion that those guys are going to, be inappropriate with them, but still, it's like, it's just all violence and they want to kill and stuff like that. So
the intertext that I draw is Cold Mountain. The gist of that movie,
because that's set in the Civil War too.
It is.
Okay.
It's a retelling in a way of the Odyssey from Charles Fraser's novel, which was a big award winner. It's a powerful piece of work. And one of the tensions that runs through Cold Mountain, which runs through this movie as well, when the men go, the able-bodied, soldierling age fellows are off to war, what you're left with are the children, the infirm, and the plainly wealthy who can buy themselves out of responsibility. Some of those become the home guard, and they're meant to hold on to the holdings of the men who are away and look after the women and children and the aged and the infirm. In Cold Mountain and in The Beguiled, it appears that home guard, they're not always good fellas on the up and up trying to care for everybody's property. They are given over to some of their basest impulses.
Right.
And in that way, having this McBee in the house is not necessarily the worst thing for these women.
Right. It's someone to protect them, theoretically.
And he's able to get away with his lie when the Home Guard folks invade the facility of this plantation. He says, I'm a cousin from Texas. Mm-hmm. I'm in for the cause. And Geraldine Page's Farnsworth character buys into the lie.
Yeah, right. She helps forward it.
If you get any ideas of trying to amuse yourself with any of the ladies in this house,
wait
you'll
just a
find
minute.
yourself out on that road so fast you won't know what happened to you.
I do like the final scene of them zipping him into canvas and using it as a stitching lesson. That's a satisfying end, and I want him going in the dirt.
Like you blew it, dude.
Now, the usual turn here is that this was a season of movie releases in 1971, which did feature a number of Westerns. And we've already talked in our time together about McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and that's an option that a person could have turned to right after seeing this movie or just before. You could have gone to Wild Rovers. You could have gone to The Hunting Party. You could have gone to Doc, which is a retelling of the OK Corral.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It is.
It's constantly on Pluto TV on their Westerns channel, and I've thought about clicking on it. I have not yet.
I suspect that it's maybe not a great movie,
Okay.
but it has important people in it, and who knows? I'm drawn to that story, which has been redone a lot of times in Westerns. And these, it's just to say that this is not a weird movie from the standpoint of its general genre designation,
Right.
but the way that it takes the Western mythos of a lone hero constructing civilization out of the wild. It's not about that. To take the lone hero who's going to tame the outlawry of an outpost of civilization.
Right.
It's not that unless you make the outlaw these women in this mansion, but that's clearly not what's going on.
Well, it seems like the majority of these Westerns are sort of those kind of revisionist Westerns, right? I mean, obviously, we talked about McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I would argue that Johnny Got His Gun is a revisionist Western. Even Bless the Beast and Children
Yes.
it is basically a revisionist Western. So it's interesting that
Over the years, I've gotten into conversations with people who will argue about the nature of genre, and I'm game for that. And as an educator, I have a particular take. But leaving that aside, because that's not what I mean to get into, and what I do mean to get into is the notion of revising the conventions of any established way of communicating, in this case, genre formation and how you communicate through that genre. The moment you say something has been classified, the classic form has been identified, it has already been sown with how that can be revised. How that pertains to this moment is to respect the fact that many people were telling stories over the superficial realities of the Old West, including this movie. Just to jump rails for a second, among the very first Western stories that I know I was exposed to with serial conviction from my family was reruns of like Bonanza and Gunsmoke,
Right.
which pitch a particular framework based on episodic television that's going to sew everything up in 40 minutes with
Right.
commercial breaks.
nothing's going to be very challenging.
Nothing will be very
intellectually or morally.
And there's just ways that people behave that sort of become normative to how you believe this must have been people in the 19th century. Among the things they would never do is like have sex. People have children, but it's not explained how or why.
Right.
Appetite is not something that comes up. This movie is all about suppression or expression of sexual appetite. And his ability to notice how the faucet can be turned on or off kind of at will, because he's the only fetish object they've got to spray their interests on.
Right.
A different detail, which I found really touching, because Clint is really beautiful in this movie, and he's pretty much at the peak of like his physical shape. I
Yeah.
think probably he found this in his early 30s and kept it till he was about 50. We're right in the middle of that period of his life.
Yeah.
Skin is golden, age spots haven't come in. He's long and muscly.
Kind of like where Brad Pitt is right now, or over the last 10 years or so.
He and like Tom Cruise, they're stretching what's possible in human manhood.
Yeah,
It's weird.
That's true.
So the point of addressing that beauty, and the point of expressing it in the statement of revisionism, one of the key things this movie does, which I think makes people uncomfortable even to the present, is it blazons the male body. In this movie, for the first third to half, he's injured and unconscious, but this parade of 6 or 7 girls and women need to come by and care for his body. And they take turns wiping the mud off of his face, taking off his garments and putting them back on, dressing his wound and touching his body. And he's just meat that they're manipulating. That's a real revision of what Western heroes are supposed to be all about.
Yeah.
And it's the good luck of his capabilities as a performer to thread that and still come out the other side with some dignity, because he is Clint Eastwood after all.
Right.
He recognizes that the Marm is a virgin. She's a type. He recognizes that Carol, the 17-year-old, is a whore. He recognizes that Amy's a kid sister. Farnsworth is the she's the frustrated mommy. Everybody needs their thing. And then we have these weird fantasy overlays, which reminded me of Devils.
The Hieronymus Bosch art, and then, the erotic / religious
well, there's a connection
symbolism.
in this movie to seeing McBee as Jesus fallen in a Pieta.
Right.
That's explosive. That must have just got people both excited but offended. But because this movie, I don't think was very well released. I read Eastwood was frustrated with how this movie was marketed and exhibited and how it was shared with the world.
Did it do well?
No, it didn't.
It doesn't really fit neatly into any hole.
Clint Eastwood, man, the symbol, the sexual enemy.
This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks, a conversation between Garrett Chaffin-Quiray and
Ed Rosa.
Boop boopity doo.